What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the settings in Modern Warfare 4's beta on the surface may look very similar to previous Call of Duty games, and many of them are literally identical. However, there are a few key differences to point out here, and therefore I wanted to share my settings guide here, going through each of the settings that I use, why I use what I use, and what I'm changing compared to previous games in order to get a similar feel. And so this video isn't about telling you to just copy and paste everything I use and it will feel great for you. Of course, you will have to make adjustments to better suit you and your preferences and your playstyle, but this is at least designed to get you on your feet and give you a good starting point to build from and to help you understand some of these settings better. Keeping in mind this is designed for controller players, and also I do play on PS5, so when it comes to graphic settings, we're only going to be seeing PS5 graphics. So without further ado, let's dive right into this, and we're going to start this off with our controller settings. With it, I personally have always preferred a tactical button layout. That means I can crouch and slide without having to take my thumb off of the aiming analog stick, and if I want to melee, yeah, I'll have to do that to hit the circle button. But I've always really preferred the tactical layout for those reasons. Then when it comes to our horizontal and vertical stick sensitivity, I always like keeping these equal at 1.65. That is my preference. I feel like that gives me a fast enough sensitivity that I can generally turn around reasonably quickly if needed, but slow enough that I still maintain a fair amount of precision, and then we are going to be making adjustments to our sensitivity values when aiming down sight. Either way, I leave all of these off. I know a lot of people like swapping this, so they shoot with L1 and R1 rather than L2 and R2. That one is, of course, down to personal preference. I don't like using controller vibration as well, never really have. I just find it to be an unnecessary distraction. Same thing with the trigger effects. This might be good in like single player games to feel a bit more immersive, but in multiplayer, generally you just want things to feel as responsive as possible, so I always leave that off. And then let's get into our dead zones. And I definitely would recommend going into this dead zone setting here and making some adjustments. When it comes to my stick dead zones for left and right, I leave these at 1. Now technically I could drop these all the way down to 0 because I use an aim controller with TMR sticks on it, which of course I will leave my affiliate link down below if you guys are interested in maybe taking your controller game to the next level. And with those TMR sticks, as long as I'm calibrating my controller properly, I will have literally 0 dead zone to worry about, and therefore I can set my in-game dead zone settings down to an extremely low value. I still like keeping it as 1, just so there's essentially no chance I'm going to experience any stick drift at all. And that's basically what you want to do, is find the lowest value you can get here without experiencing drift. And to test that drift, you can just click this button here and you can see I am like moving my stick a little bit with my thumb to simulate the drift, even though my controller doesn't have it. So you can see the left stick is moving a little bit. You don't really want to see that movement. So if you are seeing movement without touching your controller, then you may want to bump this value up a little bit. And now if I'm moving it about the same amount as I just was, you'll see that left stick is not moving, and therefore I found a good value. If you leave this value too high, then you may feel that things are not quite as responsive as you'd like them to be, as you're going to have to move your analog stick a fair amount before any input is registered. Now, another little tweak that I personally like making is for my left stick, which is for movement. I like lowering my maximum dead zone down to about 75. That just makes things feel a little bit more snappy, a little more responsive with my movement, because you don't need a huge range of motion. It's either I want to be moving or I don't want to be moving, and it's very rare that I just want to move very slowly a little bit. And so this just means I have to move my stick less to reach the maximum amount of input. But on my right stick, I do want to keep this very high. I just leave it at the default of 99 because that gives me a full range of motion to work toward, which gives me that added precision with my aim. Then with your L2 and R2 button dead zone, I'd also recommend dropping these at least a little bit, just to make those feel slightly more responsive as well, especially if you are using them to aim and shoot. Next, getting into aiming, for sensitivity multiplier, I don't touch this setting because I do the advanced sensitivity multiplier. With look inversion, my brain works normally, so I don't use look inversion. I'm just kidding. For some people, look inversion just feels right, and you'll know if it does for you or not. And now let's dive into our aiming advanced settings. This is where I made a few adjustments. By default, for your ADS sensitivity transition timing, this is gradual. I personally prefer instant. This means if I'm spinning my aim as I start aiming down sight, I want my aim down sight sensitivity, which is a lower value, to kick in immediately while I'm in the process and not gradually as I'm in the process of aiming down sight or after I'm fully aimed down sight. That feels terrible in my eyes, at least. In saying this, gradual is not necessarily the wrong setting. For a lot of people, they prefer that feel of gradual, but for me, instant just feels better, so that's what I stick to. Then for my aim response curve, I like dynamic. This just keeps things a little bit snappy on the low end, especially with the very strong aim assist in this game as well. It's fine to have that snappiness because it just helps you get onto target a little faster. I know for some people, they like dropping the slope scale on this, but especially in this game, with aim assist feeling as strong as it does, I don't feel it's necessary to drop this and gain that little bit of extra precision, because by dropping this value, you're taking it closer to linear, so closer to a more one-to-one input, and I don't want to see that in this particular game. Whereas in Black Ops 7, I actually do drop this slightly, but that's because the time to kill is a bit slower, and therefore I feel like I need a bit more precision to stay on target longer. Now, let's get into some of the most important settings here for me. This is custom sensitivity per zoom. And with it, traditionally in Call of Duty, I keep this value at, oh, I forgot the whole interval thing. I keep this value at about 0.7, maybe 0.75, depending on the game. In Black Ops 7, I use 0.7. Whereas in this game, I'm bumping that up a little bit, actually a fair amount, up to 0.85. And I wanted to explain my reasoning behind this and why I think you should consider making an adjustment to this compared to what you're used to in Call of Duty, especially if you use the affected FoV setting for aiming down sights in previous Call of Duty games. Because in this game, we're going to jump over real quick to our graphics settings. You'll notice when you go over to the view settings, you can set your field of view value, which I use 105 here. And normally this is where you would have an option to select independent or affected when aiming down sight. And with that, independent means when you aim down sight, your FOV is constant regardless of what your base field of view is. So if I have an extremely low base field of view at 60, for instance, and I aim down sight versus somebody that has 120 and aim down sight, with independent, their screen would look identical when aiming down sight. So their field of view looks the same when aiming down sight. Whereas with the affected setting, it would scale your aim down sight FOV based on what your base FOV is. So if you're aiming down sight with a high FOV value, you're going to be zoomed out a little bit more when aiming down sight compared to if somebody was using the affected setting with a low FOV value. Now, normally I use that affected FOV setting in the game, but they've removed that option for the beta build of the game at least. And so I decided to hop in and do some testing with this to see what's going on. Are they locking you at independent or are they locking you at affected? And it turns out what they've done by default is they found a perfect middle ground based on my testing. Your aim down sight field of view is affected by your base field of view, but 50% less than if you were using the affected field of view setting in previous Call of Duty games. And I know that might sound a little bit confusing, so I did create a little graphic here. Keep in mind, the targets are at different distances depending on the game, so I'm comparing Modern Warfare 3 to Modern Warfare 4 here. So this is not designed to be an apples-to-apples comparison with Modern Warfare 4 versus Modern Warfare 3. It's more so a comparison between having a very low FOV and aiming down sight versus a very high FOV and aiming down sight, and the discrepancy between that and the size of the target that you're looking at is 50% less in Modern Warfare 4 compared to using the affected setting with the same zoom optic and the same FOV values. I know that's a little bit complicated, so just to simplify, what that means in practical terms is if you are somebody that used the affected option in previous Call of Duty games, and especially if you're noticing that your aim is feeling a little bit off or just weird, especially when you're using an optic in this game, which is what I was feeling immediately. This is due to the fact that when you're aiming down sight, you're not zooming out as much as you were in previous Call of Duty games. And that means your sensitivity is going to behave differently because of that slightly more zoomed in perspective. And to properly compensate for this and to get a similar feel, what you're going to want to do is increase your aim down sight sensitivity multiplier compared to what you're used to. So as I said, in Black Ops 7, I use a 0.7 value for this, for my low zoom optics at least. Whereas in Modern Warfare 4, I use 0.85. So I'm actually literally splitting the difference there. And that gives me a much more similar feel when aiming down sight with my sensitivity values. Now, in saying that, for my high zoom sensitivity, I like increasing this a little bit. This means when I'm sniping, for instance, I can just have that snappier feel where I can move my optic quite quickly and I can track targets in closer ranges a lot more effectively. So that's why I like going higher with those values. But these are all the values that I personally landed on. Obviously, tweak them to suit yourself. But as I said, I'd recommend increasing them a little bit compared to what you're used to if you're used to using the affected setting. In either case, let's move on here. Of course, we're leaving aim assist on. If you're not using aim assist, good for you, but you're crazy. And then let's talk about these motion sensor functions a little bit. This is gyro controls, and I have seen some clips floating around. I saw a clip floating around from Shotzi, and he was saying if you go into these settings here, you want to turn off FoV sensitivity scaling, and this will prevent a weird aim assist interaction. All of these settings only apply if you use gyro controls. which most of us don't. I know there are some of you guys out there that do, and in that case, absolutely make some adjustments to these settings. I don't use it at all, so I'm not going to make any recommendations here. But just know, changing that setting if you're not using gyro controls doesn't change anything. It's just a placebo thing. But next up, let's get into our movement settings. I don't touch sprint assist or mantle assist on this. I know some people like using sprint assist, it's just not really for me. Also, I like turning off the corner slice mechanic. This is that mechanic where when you approach a corner while aiming down sight, your character will like lean a little bit around that corner, but it turns out that lean is only in the first person perspective. It doesn't actually make you a harder target to see or shoot at for enemy players. And for me, at least, I just don't really like this. It's just added movement on my screen that I think is unnecessary and may be slightly distracting for no reason. I don't think it really adds to the experience. Again, for me personally, some people like it though. So again, personal preference, but I like that off. Then when it comes to slide and dive behavior, I've opted to just go with slide only because I want that tap to slide to be as reactive and responsive as possible. And honestly, I'm not really into the dive. I don't care about diving at all. And I was finding myself, if I was using tap to slide, I was finding I like having the short duration, so it's very responsive, but then with that short duration, I would accidentally dive sometimes. So I just wanted to eliminate that entirely, and that's why I just play slide only. There is, of course, the hybrid setting that can also help avoid the accidental dive situation if that's the route you want to go, but I just decided slide only feels best for me. Next, I leave airborne automatic mantle on, and I actually meant to leave this setting on. I don't know why that got turned off, but slide maintain sprint, I do prefer leaving that on. And for my advanced movement settings, I don't change anything here. This is all just the same. It's the same thing with vehicle behaviors. I haven't touched any of that yet. I mean, we don't have access to vehicles at this point in the beta at least, so haven't touched that. And now let's get into my combat settings. I don't think I've really changed a whole lot here, if anything. I generally just like the default settings for all of this. And that even applies to my advanced combat settings here. I don't think I've touched any of these settings. They all just feel good by default for me. And it's the same story with your overlay advanced settings. I may play around a little bit with the pinwheel delay. Maybe I do want to try short. I think I am going to give that a shot at least. As it is with moderate, which is the default, it seems fine. But I might want to give that one a shot as well. I think I'll try using that from here on out. Now, tapping over to the graphics settings. Again, I'm on PS5, so these are going to be a lot more limited compared to PC, for instance. But of course, I like using 120 Hz. If you've got a monitor that's capable of that or TV, I would recommend keeping that on. I don't touch my gamma or brightness. If I'm going to touch that, I do it in my monitor, not in my game. And I leave my eco mode to efficiency. As for quality, I turn all motion blur off. I hate any form of blur or any kind of blurriness on my screen. I like everything being as sharp and clear as possible. And the same thing goes with depth of field. I know they've done a lot of work with depth of field, and for some people, they like the looks of that. But again, for me, I like every part of my image to be as sharp as possible, and therefore I turn all of these values off. And I turn the Fidelity FX CAS setting on, and I like that at a 50 value. This is essentially your sharpness setting. I find if you go way too sharp with this, it makes things look kind of bad, but if I have it off, I find things look a little washed out, like a little bit blurry almost. So I like that 50% sharpness. I feel like it's just a nice middle ground where it looks good, but it also looks nice and sharp. As for on-demand texture streaming, this largely depends on your network and if you have any like data limits, for instance. For me, I've got a very good consistent fiber connection. I have no concerns about bandwidth usage or anything like that, so I leave mine on optimized. Then tapping over to audio, I have pretty standard settings here aside from the fact that I turn all music off. That's largely because with my job, I'm often spending time just sitting in menus while I'm recording something or while I'm handling something or tweeting something or editing a video, and I just don't want to hear that music in the background. And I also turn my dialogue volume down to 80, just so that doesn't overwhelm the gameplay audio in the middle of something. So if somebody's capturing one of my flags, for instance, I don't want that dialogue audio to be taking over me potentially hearing a footstep of an enemy that's approaching me. So I still want to hear it, I just don't want to hear it as loud. Then for my audio mix, I just use headphones here because I'm using headphones. And the only other adjustment here is I reduce tinnitus sound because I do suffer from tinnitus, so that one is a big one for me to make sure that that is turned on. As for voice chat, I don't use it, so I just turn all of that off. And then let's get into our interface settings. The one setting I would highly recommend turning on all the time is your server latency. It will appear on the top left of your screen and just let you know what your ping is to the server at any given moment. And I would also recommend leaving on your network in-game alerts. This will just pop up if something is going on with your network or the server or somewhere in between. This will let you know that something is happening. And it's nice to see that when you are experiencing issues. If you feel like you're shooting somebody and your bullets are just going right through them, it's nice to be able to have that confirmation that, yeah, this is definitely network related. Something's going on there. It's not your aim. You're not going crazy. Something's happening on the networking side. So definitely I'd recommend leaving that on. Then for readability, I haven't touched any of this. I just leave all of that at default. As for gameplay HUD, I do turn off the HUD widget shake, although a lot of the gameplay you'll be seeing in the background is my early gameplay where I didn't have this turned off. But this just prevents like your minimap and everything from shaking around if an explosion goes off near you, for instance. And again, I always just like eliminating any unnecessary sort of movement on my screen that doesn't impact the gameplay experience. As for your minimap shape, thankfully by default it's square, or at least it was for me, and I would recommend leaving it on square since you actually see a little bit more on your minimap compared to cutting the corners off and going round. And then, of course, I leave minimap rotation on, radar off. This one is often very confusing. If you turn this on, it actually replaces your minimap, and it gives you like a Halo-style radar, which eliminates a lot of information that's very important to see, so I definitely recommend keeping that off. As for the compass, I leave that on. All of this stuff, actually, I just leave default from here on out. And there we go. That is going to wrap it up for my settings guide for the Modern Warfare 4 beta. Of course, some of these settings are likely to change with the launch of the game. We may get some new settings, some extra settings on top of this, or they may adjust certain things and how they work. So I plan on having an updated settings guide for the launch of the game. But that's where I'm sitting at with the beta, at least. And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the fact that they've removed the option to choose independent or affected field of view? And have you been noticing that things feel a lot different when aiming down sight, especially with some higher zoom optics because of this? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.